Glad to have you with us here on Seattle Seahawks Today. I am merely Tyler Jones here with you, and we are talking trade candidates. I got 4 players that the Seahawks could potentially move on from before the 2024 season begins. We'll go over those names in just a moment. Before we do, we have our final results from our June comment battle with the 49ers report. And folks, I am happy to report that we came out victorious. We defeated Chase Sr. and company, winning the comment battle, getting more comments on our videos for the month of June than the 49ers, showing why we have the best fans, not just in the NFC West, but across the National Football League. Our first W of the year over the 49ers. So with that, let's run up the score a little bit, shall we? Spam W in the comments. Stick it to Chase Sr. and company. I want to see at least 300 W's in the comments today to celebrate that win. 12s, you did it. We're proud of you. A round of applause. Thank you for your support. Let's get started with today's show. Let's begin with Jarran Reed as our first trade candidate, the biggest name on this trade candidate list. And let me preface this by saying I would be surprised if Jarran Reed gets traded, but I'm not completely ruling it out, this possibility. If Byron Murphy develops at a fast pace and you still have all that money dedicated towards Draymond Jones, right? And you got Leonard Williams, who you paid a lot of money to on top of that. You brought in Jonathan Hankins. You might want to move on from Jarran Reed potentially and try to get something out of him while you can, because although I like the idea of keeping Jarran Reed around and having multiple players that can rotate in, one could argue that you might not need Jarran Reed. And there's been some concerns about his ability to stop the run, especially when you talk about the emphasis that the Seahawks are going to have in stopping the run with the switching back and forth between the 3-4 and the 4-3. And there's also been talk about, can Jarran Reed mix in and be serviceable, if you will, with what Mike Macdonald wants to do on defense. So those are kind of the question marks, if you will, when it comes to the possibility of trading Jarran Reed. Jarran Reed, though, is coming off a season where he had 7 sacks in 16 starts. That's the biggest reason I'd keep him around, is that he can get after the quarterback. That was the highest total he's had since 2019. This is his second stint in Seattle. Began his career as a former second-round pick out of Alabama. Ended up going to the Chiefs and Packers and rejoined the Seahawks last year. Had a very good year, as we'll show you the numbers here on Jarran Reed. You can see not just 7 sacks, but also had a forced fumble, 7 tackles for loss, 54 tackles. Personally, I would rather keep him around. I don't want to see the Seahawks move on, but don't say that we didn't tell you before it happened that it was a possibility, because I think that just depending on how quickly Byron Murphy comes along, there might just not be a spot for Jarran Reed as far as that goes. You make the call here on Seahawks Today, our pin comment today. Should the Seahawks trade Jarran Reed? Type T for trade, K for keep. You might get an ad break. If so, while that ad's playing, get your votes in. Let us know what you think. T for trade, K for keep. Next on the list is Tre Brown at the corner position. And Tre Brown, we've seen him look really good. We've seen him struggle at times, and we've also seen him injured quite a bit in his stint in Seattle so far to this point. And personally, why we have him on this list and not Mike Jackson, even though I like Tre Brown more than I do Mike Jackson. With Tre Brown being younger, then there's more trade value. You can get more out of him potentially than you could in a trade for Mike Jackson. And we've heard the rumblings that Mike Jackson is more than likely to win the starting job over Tre Brown. And depending on how that ultimately plays out, you could have a loser leaves town situation where whoever doesn't win the job ultimately gets traded, because there's enough teams out there in the NFL that need outside corner help that one of these two could be serviceable for a trade to get shipped out elsewhere as far as that goes. And think about last year, the situation. Mike Jackson was coming off a very good 2022 campaign, and ultimately the idea was, after a really good offseason he had, that he was going to step in and continue to take on that role. But Tre Brown ended up beating him out after Mike Jackson struggled in the preseason. We saw Tre Brown have some flashes of brilliance, right? I mean, I think back to the Detroit Lions game when he was fantastic. The Seahawks don't win that game without Tre Brown, but with the injury issues, missed most of 2022 with that knee injury, and just things being up and down, I could very well see that one of these guys ends up getting shipped out before the season begins. I think Brown would be more likely. You look at the statistics, both players similar numbers in 2023, each with the same amount of tackles and tackles for loss. Brown had more pass breakups. He also had more interceptions, and he did so in 2 less games, comparatively speaking, to Mike Jackson there. If you had to pick one to trade, which guy are you moving on from? You saying bye to Tre Brown, or you saying bye to Mike Jackson? Type Tre for Tre Brown. Type Mike for Mike Jackson. Let us know in the comments section. Seahawks Today is your one-stop shop for all things Seattle Seahawks, daily news and rumors, live shows twice a week, Wednesdays and Fridays. We're doing Madden Sims for every single Seahawks game this season. We're doing our interactive Q&A mailbags, breaking news, and more. This is your Seahawks off-season headquarters, where there is no off-season here on Seahawks Today. Join the family of 52,000 strong here on the channel. Help us reach 53,000 subscribers. YouTube.com/SeahawksTV to subscribe now. Next up is Darrell Taylor at the outside linebacker position. And Darrell Taylor, we've seen him play very well at times. We've seen him struggle. He's been benched multiple times in the previous Pete Carroll regime, where he was given opportunities again and again to start, but kept losing out on that job. And the truth of the matter, when it comes to Darrell Taylor, I'm not breaking any news here when I say this. You guys know that he is a one-dimensional player, that he can get after the quarterback, but that's about all he can do. He struggles in coverage. He struggles in run defense. That's all that Darrell Taylor brings to the table. And what has been one of the ongoing themes that we've heard about what Mike Macdonald wants to do, not just with this defense, but really for this team as a whole. They are looking for guys to be versatile, to be able to do multiple things. And the reality is, Darrell Taylor, that's all he can do is get after the quarterback, and that's not good enough in this Seahawks defense. Darrell Taylor, still very young, a 2020 second-round pick out of Tennessee, tied for the team lead in sacks back in 2022 with 9.5. The experience, 49 career games played, 13 starts, had 5 starts in 2023. But where I would say that the reason why he is tradable for Seattle, I know some people will get infatuated with the fact that he had 9.5 sacks in 2022, but I think personally there is a couple of guys that could have done that same thing, right? I mean, we saw Boye Mafe have 9+ sacks last year. I think he's only going to improve beyond that. Derek Hall is going to improve. Who's to say Derek Hall can't do what Darrell Taylor did a couple of years ago? Uchenna Nwosu, you get back into the mix. We got Draymond Jones now involved, the outside linebacker spot. Darrell Taylor just might find himself as the odd man out. Here's the statistics from Darrell Taylor. 5.5 sacks last year, down from 9.5. That was the lowest total that he had in his 3-year career so far to this point, with 1 forced fumble, 7 tackles, and 28 total tackles, 7 tackles for loss, rather, 28 total tackles in 2023. Let's ask you, should the Seahawks trade Darrell Taylor and try to get something out of him? Type Y for yes, N for no. Weigh in, let us know what you think. Last on this list, you knew it was coming, folks. Dee Eskridge is our final trade candidate that we will discuss today. And here's the thing. I made this point about a week or two ago that when it came to Dee Eskridge, that I would do the Monix trade from Semi-Pro, where he got traded for a washing machine. You know, I would just take anything for Dee Eskridge at this point. I don't think Dee Eskridge is making the 53-man roster. He's a wide receiver and kick return guy, but he's already been beaten out by Jake Bobo and Chenault for the spots on the depth chart, the wide receiver position. So at best, he's what, your number 6 receiver potentially? Are they really going to carry 6 receivers? At the kick return spot, I think you got enough guys that can do what Dee Eskridge can do. He had the off-the-field issues last season that forced him to get suspended for 6 games, and he struggled to stay healthy. I think the reality is that Dee Eskridge probably isn't going to make the 53-man roster. If you can trade him, if somebody will make you an offer for anything, I don't care if it's a 7th-round pick or a backup safety or something, I would take anything for Dee Eskridge at this point in time. I would trade him tomorrow if an offer came on the table. Dee Eskridge, I have said this in the past. I'll reiterate, the worst draft pick the Seahawks have made in recent memory. Second-round pick in 2021 out of Western Michigan. We've seen that he's fast, that he's got the skill set, but just hasn't put it all together. And, I mean, the numbers, folks, I mean, you want to hide the women and children from these statistics because, I mean, as my friend Big Tex would say, damn brutal. I mean, you look at it, folks. 2023, no catches, none. I had as many catches as Dee Eskridge did for the Seahawks last year. 17 total in a 3-year stretch for 122 yards and 1 touchdown. That just simply isn't good enough, folks. Who is a player the Seahawks should trade? We've gone through 4 potential trade candidates on this show. Technically 5 if you include Mike Jackson too. Weigh in, be honest with me, sound off. Who should Seattle move on from? Chime in that comment section, let us know, and we'll see you next time right here on Seahawks Today.